Would you ever like to come back to Lake Champlain and look for any more of the shipwrecks?
Oh, absolutely. I would happily spend my life just working on shipwrecks in Lake Champlain. This is such a cool lake. The preservation of these wrecks is like nothing else in the world. It's also so nice to work with, both sides of the lake who really care about this history and like to protect these wrecks, which, a lot of the Great Lakes, unfortunately, is kind of like, we call it the Wild West, where everybody kind of has a hand in it, and so it's been a little bit difficult to police these wrecks, and so they've been looted. And here you have an attitude of most of the community thinking, well, let's protect them, let's share them, that's really, really so nice to hear from our point of view.
And the great thing about Lake Champlain is it preserves these shipwrecks so perfectly.
Exactly. It's cold, dark, fresh water, and it's like putting something in a fridge. It preserves it more than you've ever seen. Like the Phoenix One, we were diving on that last summer, and you swim up to that wreck. It's in 60 to 110 feet of water, so it's deep, deep, protected from all the ice and everything. And then when you swim up to that wreck, it's just a 12-feet structure in front of you, and it's enormous, and it's really cool. The timbers are so well preserved. Even on these wrecks that are in shallow water that get hit by ice every year, the timbers look like they were cut yesterday. They're square cut and perfect. You can see the wood grain, you can see the saw marks. It's really amazing.
Obviously, the Philadelphia was raised back in the 30s. We've seen cannons raised, anchors raised from some of these famous shipwrecks. But when it comes down to whether the ships themselves should be raised, that's always an ongoing discussion.
It still is an ongoing debate in all of nautical archaeology. On Lake Champlain, they've always kind of believed in situ preservation. A lot of that is because raising any one shipwreck, well, first of all, you have to pick one out of 300. How do you do that? Their value is really a subjective kind of decision. So who's deciding it? Why is it important? And then to raise one single shipwreck, you're looking at millions of dollars, and multiply by 300. It's just not feasible. But in situ preservation, of course, has its own problems. That at best it will stay the way it is. And obviously, a lot of the cases, that's not what happens. We have hurricanes. Right. We have the zebra mussels have already, moved into Lake Champlain. They've destroyed a lot of the wrecks in 100 feet or less, which is where most of the wrecks are, to be honest. The quagga mussels, which are out on the Great Lakes, and this is why the whole Spitfire project is being considered. They will be in Lake Champlain one way or another within the next 5 years, is my guess. How much coverage they'll get is hard to tell. But they will threaten all of those deep water wrecks. And
you mentioned Spitfire. Spitfire was discovered back in 1997, and for 20 years now, the discussion has been, what do we do about that shipwreck? Do we leave it there?
Exactly.
We can get the underwater footage. People can appreciate it that way, but is it under threat from either zebra mussels or, as you mentioned, the quagga mussels that are now working their way to the lake?
Right. And so I don't know exactly how deep that is, but it's well over 100 feet. And even at over 100 feet of water, it was still damaged by one of the hurricanes we had since 2000. They've noticed that part of the mast was broken. And so it's not as stable of an environment as we would like it to be, even though it's so deep and the water is like, it's nothing, salt water. It just destroys all the wood. Those little teredo mussels, they just drive right through. But
when shipwrecks are brought up, we've seen how quickly they deteriorate.
Yes.
Has advancements been made in preserving shipwrecks like that, that they're getting better and better, that if they do bring it up, they can possibly save it?
This is why I think a large part of this discussion can be revisited. In just the past few years, the Belle, which was sunk in Texas's Matagorda Bay, LaSalle's ship came to discover Texas, colonize Texas. It was a failed colonization process. That shipwreck was excavated in the 1990s and was conserved at Texas A&M University in our conservation research lab. You'd go out there, you'd see timbers all the time being put into the freeze dryer and conserved with PEG, which is polyethylene glycol. It's like a wax. And this has now recently been completely finished, this whole exhibit, and it's moved to Austin, the Bob Bullock Museum in Austin. And I just went to visit it myself in April, and let me tell you, it is a phenomenal exhibit. It's probably one of the greatest success stories we could hope for. The thing about it is the conservation process is never finished. It's been conserved for 17 years, and now it's stable for the most part. but they can't just leave it and forget it now. It has to be continued to be monitored to see if anything is warping, to see if anything is changing. All of, everything, when you take the shipwreck out of the water, if there's iron on wood, you have to take the iron out of the wood to conserve them separately because they require different processes. And so it's a very complicated process. We've seen Vasa in Stockholm, Sweden. This is kind of one of our largest success stories. It was done in the 60s, so this was also the earliest completely recovered ship, and it was recovered right out of Stockholm Harbor. I think it was in something like 30 meters of water, and they kind of brought it up shallower. It was a full shipwreck. It was so well preserved, and the conservation process lasted something like 20 years. I'm not exactly sure. And it was a really successful tourist attraction for many years, and it still is, and it's still actually bringing in money, which is not something you expect after you've spent millions and millions of dollars on this kind of thing. But they are starting to notice problems with the conservation now, things we just couldn't have known until now because nothing had been done before. Because some of the iron fasteners weren't removed, they're starting to cause problems with in the wood. Also because a lot of the bacteria in the water was not completely removed out of the wood timbers, they're causing kind of acid blooms. It's interesting to watch, and because it's such a treasured piece of the Swedish history, they will be taking great care of it. I'm not actually very worried about it, but it is kind of a warning case to anybody who's not prepared to spend the rest of the country's life.
You're always going to be having to worry about that. And the Philadelphia at the Smithsonian, is that in good shape?
Well,
or is that
it's doing okay now. It's not in great shape, largely because when it was recovered, conservation in the 30s, conservation processes were unknown. Nobody knew what to do with it then, and so Colonel Haglund, who recovered it, he actually did a great job for what he knew, and he did really care about it, and that was obvious in all of his reports and everything. But basically it was stuck on a barge and paraded around Lake Champlain, allowed to dry out, and the wood dried out and it warped. And when you look at it now, it looks pretty impressive, but it doesn't look probably like what it should look, which is, like I said, in Lake Champlain, the boats look like they were cut yesterday. So, and this looks like an old boat, and that's probably not what it should have looked like.
And that's exciting for you when you look at, obviously when you're down below and diving, but even when you look at footage and you see the shape of those boats, that must be.
Well, what's happening now, which is really, really a new exciting thing for nautical archaeology, is what we call photogrammetry, and it's going underwater with any kind of camera. Really, you could do it with a GoPro. However, we were lucky enough to have nice big cameras, and taking thousands, literally 20,000 pictures went into Phoenix 2. That you can then send through a software program called Agisoft PhotoScan, and it creates a model, and it's a 3D model, and it can be put up online, and people can go and look at it for free. And this was all done by our recent Dr. Kotaro Yamafune, who did his dissertation on underwater photogrammetry.
So is this available? Can folks?
It will be very soon.
It will be soon.
We're working on it.
So folks will be able to go online and
and
really
there is something available from
last
year. Last year's model was already up. What we've done this year, because we started excavating new sections, we'll add those, and it will be actually also a video tour of the wreck. And so you don't actually have to dive to see the amazing preservation and the wood timbers that are still there. And you can get one-to-one scale accuracy, so you can zoom right into a timber and look at it as if you're looking at it in front of you.
So that's fantastic. So folks can go online now, and soon we'll just have a mind-blowing experience.
I think
being able to see all these photographs.
And it's just getting better. I mean, photogrammetry is literally in the last 2 years that it's even been done on shipwrecks, and so our shipwreck in 2015 was actually the first that size to be done by photogrammetry. And so this year it's become a little bit more prevalent all over the world, and Dr. Yamafune has been a big part of that. He's been helping everybody. He's been training a lot of people, in fact, to get this done so that we can see shipwrecks, in Croatia, in Florida, in Australia, all over the world, and we can see them just online for free. And you don't have to dive on them. You don't have to travel there. And it's really, really amazing to see that.